Hi everyone. So today we're going to be talking about plant biotechnology and its impact on food. So a little overview, we'll be talking about introduction to biotechnology, crops and methods used when using genetic modification, what GMOs are in certain organizations, and then the impact on food and food prices. So what is biotechnology? Biotechnology is advancements created using biology at the molecular level. These advancements can be used for many reasons regarding humans, animals, medicine, agriculture, and so many other things. But these are just four of the big ones. When it comes to plants and biotechnology, we are really focused on crops. So crops can be genetically modified to fit the needs of our growing population. This can be for increase in food production, to withstand climate change, and to decrease costs. So these are the three main reasons why we would choose to genetically modify so many crops. So here are four examples of crops that are commonly genetically modified. We have soybeans, which is used for food for animals, soybean oil, and processed food. Canola, which is used for cooking oil and margarine. Sugar beets, which is modified for granulated sugar. And then potatoes are modified to resist pests, diseases, bruising, and browning. So some methods that we use when genetically modifying crops are selective breeding, genetic engineering, and then genome editing. Selective breeding is taking one trait from one crop, one trait from a second crop, and putting them together to make a new crop. Genetic engineering is taking a gene from one crop, taking it out, and then putting it in another crop. And then genome editing is actually a more recent form of biotechnology. And one example of genome editing would be removing a gene from a DNA sequence. So you would take your crop and remove that gene, and then that crop now has new traits because that gene is missing. So GMOs are genetically modified organisms. So any plant that you use that you genetically modified, that's a GMO. So we're going to talk about the benefits and the issues of GMOs. So some benefits are food production and greater yields. GMO plants can kill their own pests. So you can genetically modify crops so that they can resist insects and pests. And that way you don't have to use fertilizers or pesticides. Reduced emissions, they can actually increase nutrient content, and we'll talk about that in a later slide. They are deemed safe by the FDA, and they can withstand climate change. However, there are some issues with GMOs. Many consumers are skeptical because they are not organic. And again, we'll talk about that later, but they're concerned with some of the long-term effects of GMOs since we do not know, especially with new technology such as genome editing, we're just not sure what kind of effects those will have later in life. Insects can develop resistance to crops. So while crops develop, we can genetically modify them to resist insects. Insects will then build a tolerance to those crops and eventually be able to get into those crops, which is something we don't want. They can also decrease nutrient content, so that'll come in at a later slide. And they are not organic. This basically just comes down to preference of the individual, but for individuals who are looking for mainly organic diets, GMOs are not the way to go, so it can be inconvenient. So the FDA is an organization that regulates and enforces the standards for the safety of GMOs used for human and animal consumption. So this is the big one that basically just deems, is the GMO in question, is it safe? It's the FDA's requirements for a safe GMO product is it must be created in clean conditions, must not use any harmful substances, and it must be labeled correctly. So in terms of labeling, the USDA regulates and enforces the standards of organic foods as well as labeling. So any food containing materials from being genetically modified must be labeled. So to the left on the top, the one that says bioengineered, if you see that sticker, that means it is genetically modified. The one on the bottom means it is organic. So organic means food grown without any synthetic added to it. Synthetic is just a substance or a material made in the lab that is then put into a crop or something like that. In this case, it would be a crop, and that's how we genetically modify them. So it's just important to look at labels when deciding if you would prefer an organic food over a GMO food. So decreases in cost, GMOs require less resources from farmers in order to be produced. So even though you are adding stuff to the crop, you are actually reducing what is needed to grow on its own, because we don't need as much land, fertilizers, pesticides, water, or specific soil. So then that way farmers can sell their produce for a cheaper amount because they are not needing those expensive resources. And then nutritional value. Many people believe that GMOs actually are low in nutritional value. However, in many cases, GMOs are modified to include more nutrients. So some of the main ones are vitamins, minerals, and fatty acids. One thing to note, however, is a lot of times if you increase the nutrient density of one type of nutrient, it'll decrease some of the other ones. So that's just important to note that if you have a GMO that is high in vitamins, it might be lower in minerals and fatty acids or vice versa. So what does this mean for food? This means that biotechnology and GMOs are positive aspects of our constantly growing society, but there are pros and cons and considerations to be made when producing, consuming, and using GMO products on a consistent basis. So just again, it ultimately comes down to the individual, and GMOs are just as safe from what we know now as organic foods. So for the questions, question 1, true or false, sugar beets can be genetically modified to be used for granulated sugar. This is true. Question number 2, which of the following organizations is the main regulator for GMOs? USDA, FDA, CDC, or WHO? The correct answer is FDA. USDA is the main regulator for labels in organic food. And then what is one benefit of GMOs? So here are some possible answers like lower cost, food production, fewer pesticides. Any of these answers are great. Thank you.